Hey guys, it's Dr. Cube, and about a week ago, I brought this, the glorious Model D. Now, I made an unboxing video on it, and I'll admit, it really wasn't that good, the camera angles and all that were all off, and, it really wasn't that informative either. However, I'm coming back to it, and I'm making another video reviewing it properly, and, actually having a hand cam like this. Now, this video is just commentating over some Skywars clips I recorded before, but the information still should be pretty good, and I have tried to cover as much as I can. Anyway guys, leave a like and subscribe if this helps you, and anyway, watch to the end of the video. Enjoy. So, the glorious Model D. This mouse is the ergonomic version of the glorious Model O, and in my opinion is an amazing mouse. It has an ergonomic design and is extremely light, weighing in at around 68 grams. This combined with the glorious Ascend cord makes it feel just like a wireless mouse, and you can easily use it for hours without feeling any hand or wrist fatigue at all. It also comes with the glorious G skates, which help it glide really nicely over pretty much any surface. The two side buttons are nice and large and easy to reach without your thumb having to change its position much. The buttons are all nice and crisp, and the scroll wheel has a nice feeling as well. On top of all that, the mouse overall looks amazing, with the RGB strips along the sides and on the mouse wheel, and the honeycomb hole design also looks pretty cool. At first I was skeptical that the holes might feel uncomfortable or weird, however, after using it for countless hours over the past week, I've found you barely notice them at all. And if anything, they actually provide a nice sort of texture, and they also act like a grip to help your hand from sliding down the mouse too much. Overall, I've enjoyed my experience with this mouse a lot, although it hasn't exactly been entirely smooth running. I found when using certain grips to do things such as butterfly clicking, which I will cover later on in the video, my hand had a tendency to slip down the back of the mouse a bit. I imagine that also for anyone with small hands, this could potentially be an issue as well. However, I have fairly large hands, and as I said, this only happened to me when I was using some weird grips such as this one to butterfly click. Now, the only other issue with the mouse was a fairly strange one when I first plugged the mouse in. The mouse just didn't seem to move the cursor smoothly, and it was only really small jerky moves which didn't really seem right at all. Now, I have the glorious Model D software open now, and I can show you exactly what happened and how I fixed it. So, as you can see, if I go to this tab and set the lift off distance to 2mm, my mouse starts having some really weird movements. However, if I switch it back to 3mm, the mouse goes back to normal and it's okay. Now, I'm not 100% sure why this is, but I think it's because of the surface which I'm using my mouse on. I couldn't seem to find any surfaces which it would work properly on with the 2mm liftoff distance, which I think may be because you can only use the 2mm liftoff distance on a proper, good quality mousepad. I know that all the reviews of the Model D that I looked at never mentioned anything like this, which I think could be because they all had good setups with a decent mousepad. And the one that I'm using, it's not actually a mousepad at all, it's actually a cube mat, so I don't know if that's why it wasn't working for me, but hey, maybe it does work for you on for 2mm, but it didn't work for me. But if you do have a Model D and it's doing some glitchy movements like I showed before, try changing the liftoff distance and it should fix it. Anyway, now that we're in the software, I'll take a moment to briefly bring you through how it works. Everything here is pretty self-explanatory and easy to use, which is one great thing with all glorious mice. Over here on the left, you can change and edit macros and mouse profiles, which I'm not going to go into details of how to use them now, but they're fairly easy to use and you can always search on Google or whatever for some tutorials if you particularly want to do anything with them. On the right, there are several tabs, which I'm going to go through now. The first tab is the DPI settings, where you can change all the DPI stuff, and I personally didn't like the DPI settings which came with the mouse, so I changed them to my liking, and you can do the same if you want to, by just selecting a DPI setting which is ticked, and then just dragging the slider to whatever you want it to be. Now, I'm just gonna leave it how I have them now, because that's what works for me. You can also tick different ones which if you want your mouse to have certain DPI settings. For example, I'm never going to use anything higher than 1200 DPI, so I've just unticked these ones. And you can also click this box to change the color it shows on this little LED over here when you change it. So if you don't like the ones that show, you can do that as well. So plenty of customization there. I wouldn't suggest ticking the XY independent unless you want your mouse to have different sensitivities going when you move it left and right. So, not left and right, up and down, left and right. So just leave that unchecked and everything should be fine. Under the lighting tab, you can change the mouse lights, which is pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to go through how to use it all. I've left mine on the default settings, I think, because it looks pretty cool. And yeah, you can also change like the sort of different effects and stuff. But you know, you can mess around with that. There's nothing too important there. Under mouse parameters, like I showed before, that's the liftoff distance, which I would suggest leaving at 3mm. I haven't really had any issues with that, and I've had lots of issues with the 2mm, so you know, just leave it there. By default, it is set to 2, so you know, you might want to change that if you are having issues, like I said. Under polling rate, just leave it at the highest amount. I'm pretty sure the default setting is the highest as well. I'm not really sure why you'd want to change it down, as that'll change like, I'm not really sure how to explain it, but it'll make things a little bit slower. So just leave that at 1000 Hz, which is the highest, and everything will be fine. And then finally, the debounce time tab is where you change the debounce timer of your mouse, which basically controls how easy it is to double click your mouse. The lower it is, the easier it is to double click, and if you put it all the way up, it's basically impossible to double click at all. I leave mine at the lowest setting, and that's just because I enjoy being able to have a high CPS juice double clicking, which sort of brings me on to the next part of this review, which is how this mouse performs for gaining a high CPS. Previously, I had just done normal clicking as my primary clicking method, which you can do on pretty much any mouse, and I could get around 8 to 10 CPS. Like you'd expect, this was pretty easy on the Model D, and I could do that just the same as before without any issues. A second method of clicking is jitter clicking, which I was never very good at, but again, this mouse was absolutely fine for jitter clicking, and I could get around 12 CPS, although I could never aim, but that's my fault, not the mouse's fault. After this, it gets a bit more interesting. After setting my debounce timer as low as possible, I learnt to double click, allowing me to do some pretty cool stuff. If I normal click but make sure to double click while doing it, I can get around 10 to 14 CPS very easily, although I'm not actually clicking the mouse that many times a second. But because I'm double clicking what should be around 6 or 7 CPS, it becomes 10 to 14 like I said, so that might be a bit confusing, but basically in essence it's doubling your CPS by double clicking. Pretty obvious, right? On top of all this, you can also butterfly click on this mouse very well, and like the Model O, you can get 20 CPS if you practice enough. I have hit 20 CPS before butterfly clicking, although usually I get around 15 CPS. I don't use butterfly clicking that much in game though, because I can't aim very well with it, but it's certainly very easy to get decent CPS butterfly clicking on this mouse. Drag clicking is also possible on this mouse, although I don't know how to do it, so unfortunately I can't say if it works for me, but maybe I'll learn how to do it sometime in the future. I know other people have drag clicked over 20 CPS on the Model Ds before, so if that's something you really want to do, this mouse won't be limiting you at all. Overall, I'd say this is an amazing mouse and definitely the best I've ever owned. For 50 USD, it's definitely worth your money, and is a really nice mouse for both gaming and for everyday use. The build quality is very good, and the mouse also adds a nice aesthetic touch to any setup. The ergonomic design is very comfortable for medium to large sized hands, and despite some people's belief that the ergonomic design doesn't make clicking fast. Uh, it's not, it's just the same as any other mouse, except it's got the nice comfortable feel, right? Uh, I'd recommend this mouse to anyone as a low budget professional gaming mouse, although if you have smaller hands, I'd suggest going for the Model D minus, which is the exact same thing, but a smaller size. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful or enjoyable, please leave a like and consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out. And I'm also planning to make a comparison video between the Model D and the Model O about 2 or 3 weeks from now when I borrow my friend's Model O, so stay tuned for that video. If you have any questions about this mouse, feel free to leave them in the comment section and I'll answer all of them to the best of my ability. But other than that, I'll see you all in the next one. See ya.